In franchising, most people only see one side of the equation as a franchisor or as a franchisee.
But today's guest has lived both. Ryan Junk has spent more than 30 years in the health and wellness industry, leading brands like UFC Gym and CycleBar.
He's bought struggling locations, turned them around, and built systems that dramatically improved performance.
Today, we're talking about what it really takes to build a successful franchise business, especially if your goal is to step out of the daily grind and lead through great operators.
If you're curious about semi-passive ownership and how strong teams drive real growth, this is a conversation you won't want to miss. I'm Sara Waskow, and this is my colleague, Roxanne Rapske. Welcome to episode 116 of Unpredicted Entrepreneur. We created this podcast to bring you information and everything related to business ownership. And so today we are very excited to welcome Ryan Junk. Let me get your title right. Ryan is the brand CEO of Beam Light Sauna. And he is a franchisee as well as a franchisor. And so we were excited to learn from him today. So Ryan, welcome to Unpredicted Entrepreneur.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So we had a great conversation with you in preparation for this podcast. And like we always like to do, just tell us a little bit about your background and your wealth of knowledge. Well, don't tell us all of your wealth of knowledge in franchising at this time, but a little bit about your franchising experience.
Yeah, I've been in the health and I would say wellness kind of vertical for the last 30 years, maybe about 31 years, and half of that has been in franchising. So I love health and wellness. I have a sports background, active family, just love everything about the industry. And franchising, I've grown to love the entrepreneurial side of the business as well, and helping franchisees start and grow their businesses as well. So it's kind of a great combination.
How did you get started in the franchise world?
So I was in the corporate, health and big box world for most of, I'd say for half of my career, and really loved it. Loved big teams, national company with over 400 locations. Got to travel, had different, regions and districts throughout my time there. And then we started a company, a big box company called UFC Gym. And it was with the founder of 24 Hour Fitness. And we decided to really kind of go into that world of, youth training and adult training, and really make an impact on people to train a little differently. And then at that time, our partners were the UFC, and they wanted to really grow faster and get into franchising. At the time, Anthony Geyser was really growing LA boxing. And I would say, kind of a head and shoulders along a lot of the competitors in that boutique space. And he was really doing boutique fitness before it was even a thing, wasn't even a category at the time. And so we partnered up with Anthony. That's how I kind of met with Anthony and decided, when he moved on and started Exponential Fitness, I jumped on the opportunity to work with him.
You've been running brands. You're now a brand CEO, but you're also a franchisee. So I think that makes you unique because you can see both perspectives. And that's really why we wanted to have you on today, because I think you can speak to leadership and then also to running a franchise, right? So we get a lot of clients that are coming out of corporate America. They're executives. They know all about leadership, but leadership in a corporate environment looks a lot different than leadership in a franchise environment. So I think that gives you that unique perspective. So kind of walk us through what you see with some of the gaps in leadership.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. If you've ever had children, I think it's kind of along those lines. Before you had kids or your wife had kids, everybody tells you that, your life's going to change once you have children. And I'll just speak from experience. When everybody would tell me that, I would say, yeah, of course, it makes sense. And everybody tells you that. And you just continually go back saying, yeah, I know my life's going to change. And you don't realize it until you actually have children that this is different and my life just changed and I had no idea. And it's one of those things in entrepreneurship where you kind of understand, what it's going to be like once you start your own business. But Once you switch, it's no one can prepare you for it. Every journey is different and every person responds differently, but you're spot on. Whereas if you're a great leader in your current business as an employee, regardless if you have equity or regardless of, the environment or the culture that you come from, what the biggest shift is that when you switch to being an entrepreneur and you're the one writing the checks and you're the one covering the taxes, and you're the one signing the guarantee on the lease, you're the one taking out the loans, you do tend to look at the business different. And I'll tell you, some do a really good job at transitioning, others don't. And I'll tell you that the trick is remembering what made you successful at your current business, and take that with you. A lot of times people reflect and they'll think, man, if I own my own business, I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that. Write those things down. Record yourself saying it, because the stress is different. The pressure is different. There's a lot of things that, I did, and I made these mistakes myself, where, as an employee, an executive of a corporation, I don't feel like I'm writing the personal check to my employees because it comes from payroll. Even if you're signing the check, it's not your money. And then when you transition to your own, franchise and it's your own business, a lot of times you don't go out of your way. Little things like, I'm sure at your corporate business, there's times where you buy your team members coffee, or you celebrate a birthday, or there's certain performances that you celebrate outside of a normal compensation package, outside of their bonus, outside of commissions. It's your way as their leader to show appreciation, to make emotional deposits with your team. And so you feel this urge to go above and beyond what's outside of just the normal paycheck. But sometimes, entrepreneurs, when they start their business, because they're moving money from their account into their business and they're writing the checks, and they're covering the taxes. And sometimes in the very beginning, you're not profitable yet. And so you're looking at it as, hey, the business isn't profitable yet. So, I'm going to bear down, or I'm not going to maybe spend these extra expenses on your team. And so you slowly start to lead and manage a little differently than maybe how you did in the corporate world. And so I always kind of have everybody have that perspective that when you own your business, before you hire a single employee, you have every responsibility and you wear every single hat. And the people that you're hiring are to replace some of the work. And I said some of the work that you don't want to do, but you're replacing some of the work, but all the work is on your plate. And so when you're bringing people on, it's not just writing the check, it's remembering the leadership and the culture that you created at your prior company.
And that's a good point about, we actually were going to meet with somebody today, and in the prep call, he said, he was talking about that transition as well. And he said, when you become an entrepreneur, everything is your problem. Like every little single thing in that business is your personal problem. So I thought that was a unique perspective, but kind of what you just said, Sara and I talk a lot about your highest and best use, right? What do you enjoy doing, and what role are you going to fill? And then what are you going to hire for? So it's a worthy expense because it's doing stuff that you might not be good at or you might not enjoy doing. So kind of to your point, you have to keep that in mind when you're writing that check, because that person's taking a job off your plate. So you're either going to spend your money or spend your time doing that, right?
Yep, that's spot on. And sometimes your time is way more valuable than the money that you're paying for that work to be done. And the work sometimes may not be glamorous to you. As the owner of the business, it may be work that you just feel like, man, this is kind of mundane or this is beneath me. But the person that you hire to do the job, this is exciting work for them. And it's work that they look forward to doing, and they take fulfillment out of that.
Yeah.
And so they're going to put a lot more passion in that work than you ever will.
Like doing the books.
Like doing the books, or I was going to say social media, because our social media manager thrives on it and loves it. And Roxanne and I struggle with it. So
yeah. And she stays on top. She hounds us, but she stays on. Shout out to you, Anne, if you're listening to this.
That's right. Anne Small. She does a great job for us. So I think that's a good segue into kind of the semi-passive piece.
Yeah.
You have your own CycleBar franchise. How many locations do you have personally currently?
Right now, we have four locations.
4. Okay. So obviously,
and a big corporate job.
plus a corporate job. So talk to us a little bit about some of the nuances of semi-absentee and how to have a successful semi-absentee business. Because a lot of people talk to us about that and would like to
understand
and make that happen for them.
Yeah, I think semi-absentee, it's really how you interpret it. Everybody hears that and they understand it differently. It's not passive, right? It's not real estate. You're not buying stocks. To me, it's more of like an executive model. It's where you're going to hire a manager, and we're brick and mortar. So, we have storefronts. And so you're hiring somebody to manage your studio. That's the biggest difference. You don't have to be there every single day, but you do have to be engaged. And I'll say the executive leadership model is engagement isn't just actually walking in and walking your studio. And regardless of the business, there's KPIs. And to me, that's the most important piece of owning your own business and operating your business is how do I stay engaged? Because when you're hiring people to do the work, you're delegating that work. You're not abdicating yourself from it. And I think that's a big mistake that a lot of owners do in the beginning, where they feel like I'm going to hire somebody and I'm going to let them do the job. And then I'm just going to sit back and let, hold them accountable. The problem is that in any business or any sport, you manage the process. You don't manage the result. And if you manage the result, it's going to be really tough to be consistent. You may get lucky every once in a while, but you won't consistently hit your numbers, which drive profitability. And so you want to stay connected to your key performance indicators. And when you have a studio manager, you hold them accountable to that process. In our business and health and wellness, it's really easy to forecast your cash flow. It's really easy to forecast your revenue because you understand the process of you get a lead. You have to get that lead to come and try your business. Then you have to convert that lead into a paying member. And then you want to retain them as long as you can. And there's metrics to measure all of that. And so every single day, you should have a routine. And if you're driving into your job every day, you should still have a process where you're reviewing your KPIs from the prior day. And how does that look for the rest of that month or for that week? And then it takes you 5 to 10 minutes. If you're doing it every single day, your eyes know where to look and you see what you're focusing on. And then it's as simple as creating a success routine. So that part of that routine is when you look at the information. The other part of it is when do I have my calls? And so if I'm driving into the office, or even if I'm traveling for that day and I'm heading to the airport, you're setting time with your studio manager to walk through the prior day results, the current day setup, and then what's needed for the rest of the week, the rest of the month. And when you kind of create that routine, it also conditions them to know what's important. It gives them daily and weekly goals. And you guys are working together. And then, as an owner, the part where you can add value is if you do show up, you can add value by stopping at the Starbucks on the way in and grabbing a couple of leads at the local shop if you're good at talking to people and getting out in the community and helping them drive that lead flow. If they're struggling with phone calls, being a servant leader, maybe coming in and saying, hey, I came to help you guys out. You don't have to come in and crack the whip all the time. It could be more of a support function because that helps create that culture with your customers. And so I can go on for probably 2 hours about that, but really that's one example of staying engaged every single day. And there may be times where you can't get into the studio. I don't have a single studio in California, and I live in Southern California. I have an operator that manages my studios, and he lives in Miami, and we don't have a single studio in Florida. And so you have to have someone that can manage those KPIs. And then when they do visit the studio, you have your process there as well. And so every situation is a little differently, but what stays the same is if you want to be successful, there's not a day that goes by that you don't look at the cash flow in your bank account. And there shouldn't be a day that goes by that you're not reviewing your KPIs with your studio manager.
Wow. That's interesting that your manager is in Florida and none of your studios are in Florida either. So, that's a big deal. Now, not something I would recommend for somebody that's never done this before.
I wouldn't, and I have experience in this
Yes.
space, right? And
Right.
so it's a little different. It's if I'm coming from a different industry, you have to learn the industry. And my operator has done this for years. He's been a multi-unit manager, and he worked for me at our last corporate business. He also managed studios that were not in his market, and so he had a lot of experience before we jumped into that. But yes, you staying engaged, even if it's 5 miles from your house, sometimes you can't make it in every single day. So you have to create that process of what you can do.
I have a question about that. There are some franchisors that are now stipulating that that manager either needs to have some type of ownership or profit sharing or something to incentivize them to run that business like it's their own. Because I think a lot of people coming out of corporate or that are keeping their jobs, hiring a manager and, paying them X amount of dollars a year, but expecting them to treat that business like it's their own. There's no buy-in, right? It's not their money that's on the line. It's really just a paycheck. So how do you incentivize, how do you coach your franchisees to incentivize their managers to treat that business like it's their own?
That really comes down to leadership. And that's a tricky question to answer because I don't necessarily agree with that advice of giving them equity because it doesn't translate to them feeling the ownership just because they're giving equity. If you've never owned a business before and you've never, actually, let me take a step back. If you've never, if you never sold a business and got a payout from that, just by someone giving you equity, whether it's sweat equity or real equity in the business, it's not real money. It's not, you didn't buy it. You didn't risk it. And so you're not going to get the same type of buy-in as the owner does that's taking all the risk. So it doesn't translate, in my opinion. Okay. It's just basically a bonus. It's just structured differently. However, if you want that feeling, then you would have to have the manager put some skin in it. And to them, it's relative, right? It's a lot of money to them, maybe a lot less than what you did. So if you're looking for that, but from my experience, you're not going to find a lot of people that fit that kind of, I would say, skill set for the pay that you're willing to pay for that position that really have the capital to invest in a company. Now, it's something you could probably do over time. I think, a compensation plan that matches what they're used to is a lot more reasonable, meaning you can say, look, if you sell, let's say you sell units, let's call them membership units. I try to stay away from dollars. And so if there's a way that you could kind of find a way to either visits or memberships that translate to the dollars, because it makes it more of a tangible thing versus a profit. And so if you say, hey, look, if we can get to this many members, let's call it 500 members, you're going to get a bonus. And you cash out that bonus. And so now they do feel like they're involved in it. You could do profit sharing, whereas, hey, I want you to teach you more about the P&L, because one of the beautiful things about working for an entrepreneur is it doesn't feel like you're working for a big corporation. Yeah. And that's one of the benefits that you have as owning your own business, is that you'll see that a lot of employees would rather work for a local business, small business owner than they will a big corporation. And part of that is because you get an insight into business. You get to see the P&Ls. You get to talk about, how they structured the business, how you built the business. Some come early on, help part of construction. They get to go through that process. And so it's just the exposure to the business piece of it, but tying them into something that aligns the studio manager with the work that they're doing, that they're getting paid later. And it doesn't necessarily have to be equity. And then because there's high turnover and a lot of these employees that you do a really good job with onboarding and making them understand the business and driving culture, and they get great results, a lot of times they do want to move on to something bigger and better. And so at that point, if they've been there for a long time and you know that, hey, look, I know what I'm getting with this person, then you may want to add equity. And to me, at that point, it means something. That point, it may keep them on a little bit longer, but I definitely wouldn't lead with that thinking that's going to change the behaviors, because they haven't experienced it and they don't see the value in it.
It's a really good point.
Yeah, really good insight. Thanks for sharing that. So when somebody becomes a new franchisee, you obviously have so much to share and wisdom regarding leadership. What's some advice that you can give a new franchisee to kind of help them start strong?
Be new. Allow yourself to be new. You're probably an expert. You're probably seen by your peers at your current job as someone that has most of the answers. You probably solve everybody's problems at your work. Everybody probably comes to you when they need advice. And so because of that, that's why you're successful. And that's why you're in the position that you're in today to be able to start your own business. The challenge with that is that it's a great opportunity for you to just let your hair down and just take everything in. And be new. It's kind of like a recipe. If somebody was to, you experienced a great dish and there's something that you wanted to replicate it, the first thing you do is you'd ask the person for the recipe. You look at the recipe and say, this was such a great meal, but I'm going to swap out these ingredients. You just wouldn't do that because it wouldn't be the same. And I see a lot of franchisees, sometimes they jump in, they don't allow themselves to be new. They want to make it their own way. And it's not coming from a bad place. It's just that's a lot of times how successful people operate. But if you really want to be successful in franchising, you want to learn from your franchisor exactly how they do it, exactly how they want you to do it. And if you really want to be extremely successful, understand why they want you to do it. A lot of times during training, some franchisees listen to how, and some listen to understand so they can actually change it, right? Because they're already listening to the training and thinking how I'm going to tweak it. And again, that's not coming from a bad place, but it's not going to make you ultimately successful because you want to understand the system and processes, which is why you're buying into a franchise, which is why you're paying a royalty. And you're paying for that experience. And then once you've delivered it, you've made the meal a couple of times and it does taste great, and you want to start switching out some ingredients. I don't think a lot of franchisors out there, most of them would be upset about that, because that means you're already producing, you're already successful, and now you're trying to find different ways to work on the business. And a lot of the best ideas that we get as the franchisor comes from our franchisees, but it's not from the ones that just started. I have a lot of franchisees that are within their first 3 or 4 months, and they're giving suggestions on how to do things differently. And it's tough because they haven't been doing it long enough, right? And so some of the really good ideas come from those 1 or 2 years in that are performing at a high level, and they're tweaking it and they're using their changes to add even more momentum and separate. And so that's my biggest advice to top performing people that are entering in the franchise space, is really just be new, learn exactly how the franchisor is instructing you to do it, and then why.
Yeah, that secret sauce that's tried and true and been worked on for many, many years to get where it's at today. So that's an excellent point. Do you have any other, let's say somebody approached you and they're getting ready to start a business, or they're curious about starting a business. You're in your position, I think, and being a franchise owner, you've probably had 1 or 2 people cross your path that have said, "Hey, Ryan, if I wanted to start my own business, do you have any tips for me or any advice?"
Yeah, I would say number one, make sure that you have enough cash flow to start your business off. I think that's one area where some people underestimate that piece of it. And then the other piece of it is really making sure that you're when you're joining a system, that you agree with the culture. You agree with the direction of the organization, because what you're really purchasing and you're buying in a franchise is the support. And it's not just the support of the franchisor, it's also the support of the franchisees. And good franchisors do a really good job creating that culture. And when I say that is there's a lot of times where franchisees, even though they value the opinion and the directive from the home office or the corporate team, a lot of times they don't necessarily feel that those team members understand their situation and their perspective, because they're not the ones that are risking, their livelihood on the business. And so when you talk to these franchisees, they have a support system, not just in their local markets, but nationally. And you get to lean on those experiences. And sometimes when you get to either vent or share best practices with other franchisees, it resonates. And sometimes it reinforces what you may have heard from the home office team, but in a different way that helps kind of really hit home and helps with execution. And so I'll say those 2 things: making sure that you have enough cash flow, and number 2, making sure it's a culture and it's a business unit that supports and fosters those franchisee relationships.
That's great advice. And we talk a lot about sometimes the value of the other franchisees in the system is overlooked. A lot of people think about their relationship with the franchisor, but it's also really important to think about relationship with other franchisees. So I'm glad you pointed that out again, because it's an important piece of the puzzle for sure.
Yeah, and culture. I mean, culture is huge too. We talk about that a lot. Well, thank you, Ryan. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your wisdom and your 31 years of experience. We appreciate you for joining us from sunny California.
I appreciate you guys as well.
Thank you. So for those of you listening, thank you for joining in. If you'd like to learn more about franchising, or if you'd like to connect with Sara or me, Roxanne, please look at the links in the description below.
Bye-bye.
Bye.